If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by our in-house mad bomber, Mike Sterling. Your new hairdo looks great, Mike, by the way.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been working on it a lot.
I can see that. Let me guess, you washed it and it shrunk.
You got me.
It happens,
you got
right?
Me. Yeah.
All right, so we're joined by a couple new faces for Survival Dispatch. Ted Yoho, former congressional rep, retired, and John Martin. Ted, I'm going to have you introduce yourself to our audience, and then you, John.
Sure, be glad to. Number one, I appreciate you and Mike allowing us to come on. My name's Ted Yoho. I'm a former member of Congress from Florida's 3rd Congressional District. I served from 2013 to 2021. I served on the Agriculture Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee and was chairman of the Asia Pacific Subcommittee. Prior to that, I'm a large animal veterinarian, never been involved in politics. Practiced for 28 years, ran against a 24-year incumbent. We won. I'd never had experience in politics, but we ran against the career politicians. They either led us where we're at or they failed to prevent it. Been married for 50 years, have 3 children and 3 grandchildren.
That is, yeah, for sure. That's awesome, Ted. Way to go. John, while you're introducing yourself, could you explain to our audience how blue the Gainesville area is in particular, where Ted was elected? I mean, that's a big thing to overcome that, clearly.
Yeah, my name is John Martin. I bid you welcome from what I call Fort Hawthorne. I live in a little town called Hawthorne, Florida, in Alachua County. It's real easy to find on one of those blue-red maps. If you look at the state of Florida, most of it is red, but up in the north central part of Florida, you see what looks like a blue lake. And in the middle of that lake is Gainesville, Florida. And I kid you not, Gainesville, Florida, and Ted can back me up on this, is the San Francisco of the South. Around the area, very conservative, but in that University of Florida dot there, man, I mean, you talk about hardcore leftists. I've been living in a blue wave all of my life. Ted kind of was new to politics when we first met each other, but I grew up in it. My dad was a old line Democrat that was elected to county commission, state legislature, as one of the more powerful people in Florida, was old school Democrat. I grew up that way. But the first person I ever voted for president was Ronald Reagan, so that probably tells you a lot. I've been a Republican now for about 15 years, not so much because they have all the answers, but because there were a few that were actually asking some questions, and there were none in the Democratic Party. And like I heard old Fetterman say on a show the other day, he said that the progressives and all left him. He didn't leave them. And I felt the same way about my situation. And I'm just all about trying to save this great experiment we call the United States of America.
That's really interesting, John. I'm glad that we met, thanks to our mutual friend Tony, because when we acquired Survival Dispatch, we rolled with everything as is. We didn't rebrand it. We didn't change anything. So we recently rebranded a couple months ago. So the name Dispatch meant to dispatch information to our fellow Americans and friends of America to survive in these very uncertain times. But we've evolved since I took ownership of the company, and our mission now is still to dispatch information to our fellow Americans and friends of America, but it's to empower our audience as fellow guardians to help save the Republic and our American Christian culture that's been under attack. So, all right. So before we jump in, just a couple quick things, couple quick announcements. Number one, I just put a link in the live chat that will take you to this page. And if you click on it, it'll take you to Substack. You can sign up for a 30-day Guardian membership for free. So The link is down in the live chat. And actually, because it doesn't go automatically from our production software over to Rumble, I just put it over in Rumble as well. All right. The next thing, just a quick heads up. We've got Teresa Carpenter coming back on Wednesday. She's a Chief Public Affairs Officer for NATO's Allied Maritime Command. And we're going to be discussing censorship with her. And then this week, we're going to be shooting a ton of content on using suppressed firearms for home defense. John Wheaton, Mike Sterling, Jason Sawyer, JJ Morris, myself, and a couple other people. So it's highly likely that when we broadcast on Thursday and Friday, it'll be all of us sitting around Jason Sawyer's barn. So today, we're going to dive into this globalist war on patriots, not just here in America. And we're going to discuss how these coordinated forces around the world are essentially targeting those who stand for national pride, traditional values in all countries, not just here in America. But before we do that, like I said, we've got a couple of headline news items. And let me pull the first one up here, which is on the Chinese tariff situation. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it to y'all, but we sure could use a producer at some point in time. So here's the first one up, and I'll speak to it fairly quickly. Chinese exporters use origin washing to evade Trump tariffs, sparking global crackdown. So if you subscribe, you're a Guardian, whether it's on Substack or Patreon. The SitRep has all these links, by the way. So this has been going on for years, but it's ramped up recently. And the Chinese are trying to be sneakier. So they will take products, they will move them to another country, then they will rebrand them, change the point of origin, then try to get them past U.S. Customs so that they don't have to pay the up to 145% tariffs. But suffice it to say, I'm pretty sure that our guys are on this now. And I don't know that it's going to go too well for them. And here's the crazy part. I don't know if you caught this or not, John, but the CCP has said to these other countries, we're going to send this product through your country. You're going to get a pound of flesh. But if it gets to the ports in America and they find out that we did this and they charge the tariff, you're on the hook for the tariffs, not us.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all, Chris, because if you look at the Chinese, especially the more modern aspect of commerce, they've been basically shady and cheating. I mean, they steal our intellectual property. They do this all the time. So the fact that they're trying to do an end round around the tariffs doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. So yeah, good, definitely good point. So moving on to the next one here, a couple interesting announcements from Trump this week. 100% tariff on movies produced in foreign countries. We want movies made in America again. So this is one of the things I believe that's being aimed at the Canadian market, because a lot of American production has moved to Canada because the costs are significantly less, or so they say. Just curious, Ted, if you have any thoughts on that as far as Trump charging a tariff on foreign-made movies.
No, I think they should. I think they ought to be equitable tariffs. It goes back to the founding principles, as George Washington said. We want open and honest trade with all nations, involvement with none. And I think we've missed that mark. And so it needs to be equitable. If they're going to charge us 10%, we need to charge them 10%. But they also should focus on Sony and Hollywood, where China controls so many of those studios. And you see our actors and actresses bowing down to them. They try to make Tom Cruise take off the Taiwan insignia from
Top Gun.
And those things need to stop. We do not bow down to anybody. And for these actors that do that, we need to boycott them.
So, Ted, if I had been thinking I had to put everything in the right order, I would have had the next one for you, but I'll give it to Mike because he's next in line. This is great news. The Trump admin ends all Beagle experimentation at the NIH. Not sure if you caught this or not, Mike. I know that in the past there were some crazy things that Fauci was doing with Beagles.
What? Say it isn't so.
Right. This is pretty good news, though, especially we're big animal lovers. We're big dog lovers. I've got two big babies right here beside me, but good news at the end of the day.
Yeah, dogs don't deserve that. Actually, no animal deserves that, especially when we've got all these pedophiles laying around that we could be experimenting on. So much better.
There you go.
I mean, I'm a problem solver.
Yes, you are. We're glad to have you back.
Chris, I just wanted to say we did get a little good news from Hollywood this week. I don't know if you saw, but Alec Baldwin's movie Rust only garnered $25,000 total at the box office. So there is some good news out there.
Wow, I didn't get that either.
Boy, talk about a bullet in the head. Ooh,
hey, that's a bad pun.
Well, yeah, you're right. Wow, I didn't. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
that was
that's
completely unintended.
Yeah, that's the movie where he ended up killing his co-host.
Yeah,
because the trigger on the gun pulled itself, of course. So, all right, moving on to the next one. Yeah, we've only got this one and one more, and then we're going to be into the main topic. So, breaking VA officials report premeditated stabbing of corrections officers by MS-13 gang inmates. This is crazy stuff, John. I'm not sure if you caught this at all, but there was this basically brawl broke out at Wallens Ridge State Prison, and this was like 9:45 in the morning. 6 inmates, 5 of whom are MS-13, and they attacked the guards. They stabbed them. I mean, it was highly coordinated. If nothing else, I think that's a pretty good reason to get them out of our country. Like, we don't need them here. But actually, Ted, I'm going to come back to you on this next one. That's the last headline news because it's directly relevant to this, and you can speak to both of them together. But because of the ongoing activism by judges, federal circuit judges who think they're on the same level as the executive when they're not, Donald Trump and his team have come up with a rather interesting way of handling all these ultra-violent gang members, TD13, Trento, Aragua, etc. And he's going to reopen Alcatraz. And, you know, there were a couple people broke out of Alcatraz. The last ones, they never recovered their bodies. Nobody ever lived. They don't know what happened to the last ones. I've been to Alcatraz, and I'm telling you, there's no way anybody's swimming from there back to land. Either the waves would overpower you or the sharks would eat you. But Ted, what do you think? I think this is a pretty interesting solution to this problem, to isolate this bad element.
I do. The only one that survived Alcatraz was Sean Connery in The Rock. And I was rooting for him. But Alcatraz, I mean, when he announced this, and this is typical Trump, he announces things and you think, man, that's really off the wall. But think about this. This is one of the most notorious prisons in our history. And to put the very bad, the worst elements in there in society and, you know, throw a couple of those judges in there, I think this is great. Or send them to El Salvador because there's no play down there. And it sends a strong signal that if you're here illegally, you do these type of activities, or you're an MS-13 gang member, this is where you're going. I can't think of a stronger deterrent, and I hope he can succeed in this.
So do I. I mean, I think the gist of why they decided to do this, or he decided to do this, is if the activist courts are going to stop us from getting these illegal invaders back to their home country, whether it's El Salvador or elsewhere, right, at least we can isolate them by putting them somewhere like Alcatraz. John and Ted, you wouldn't know this, but my left eye is a prosthetic eye. I got in a really bad wreck years ago and lost my vision. So not too long after that, maybe call it 2 years after that, we were at Alcatraz. We were, you know, hanging out in San Francisco. And we walked into one of the solitary confinements and they had those metal beds hanging off the wall with the chains on them.
Right.
And it was on my left side and I didn't see it. I walked into it, and it went through my jeans and opened up the front of my leg. It was so friggin' sharp. So that's my Alcatraz story. I left with a war wound. All right.
Man, I used to be stationed out in San Francisco, so I've been out there several times. No.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy for sure. And by the way, Ted, I thought you were going to say Clint Eastwood was the one who escaped.
Well, that's right. He did too, didn't he?
Thinking back, so they actually left the cells for Clint Eastwood and the rest of them from the movie Escape from Alcatraz the way they were when they shot them. And you can actually see the spoon marks in the blocks at the back of the cells where they cut it out around where the airflow was. Pretty crazy stuff, definitely.
Well, you know, that just goes to show you what people will do or not do for freedom. And when you get in this, you'll do anything you can to get freedom back, and that's what's on the line here in this country.
Good point, Ted.
Well, on top of that, Mike, one thing that's changed dramatically since those days is that if they were to escape from Alcatraz, they'd be in San Francisco as it currently is, which is no picnic.
Right.
Yeah, your chances of being eaten there are pretty good.
Yeah, no kidding. So I've got an extra video, by the way, John, before I sent you, or after I sent you the show notes for tonight, that I added this, and I added this for a reason. It's 49-second conversation between Joe Rogan and Elon Musk speaking towards the censorship of information and what we saw during the Biden admin, but we've seen globally, and that plays right into tonight's topic of globalists trying to silence anybody who disagrees with them. And you know, Elon Musk is human. I don't agree with everything he's done, but he did restore a major piece of freedom of speech. So 49 seconds, we'll listen to this and then we'll have a quick discussion on it.
Thank you so much for buying Twitter.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm not exaggerating when I think you changed the course of history. I really do. I really think you made a fork in the road. We were headed down a path of censorship and of control of narratives that is unprecedented. Forget about what they were able to do back when they had newspapers and the media under control. What they were doing with social media by suppressing information, and when you had a combined government effort, like with what they were doing with the laptop story. We have 51 former intelligence agents saying that this is Russian disinformation. Take it offline. And Twitter complied. If you didn't buy that, we wouldn't have known that. We had no idea.
Exactly.
So like I say, that dovetails nicely into our conversation tonight with regards to globalist bad actors essentially trying to shut down anybody who has any element of national pride. I'm going to ask you all to comment on this because it really sets the stage. So Mike, I'll start with you, then Ted, then John.
I mean, he's absolutely 100% right. I mean, the fact that we were able to put the stream of information back on again was a huge thing, because we had lost our intelligence stream to the people. And without that, I mean, like I'm always screaming, without intelligence, you really don't have anything. You don't know what's going on. You're literally walking around with a blindfold on in a dark room. And in this case, we were able to turn on a light and at least uncover one eye. So, I mean, that's a huge thing. And the fact that it's allowing us all to actually speak to each other again in a dramatically less censored environment is that's an incredible step forward for all of us.
Agreed. So before I get your take on this, Ted, I got an email first thing this morning that a video that we published last week got us another strike on YouTube. It seems like every time we clear the 90 days, we end up getting another one. I'm not even going to say what it was for. It's total baloney, but I don't want to say it again because they'll probably give us another strike for saying it. But Ted, I'm really interested to hear your perspective as a former congressional rep, your thoughts on the suppression of information and how it's being leveraged against us.
No, it is. I mean, this stuff comes out all the time. And you brought up the 17 intelligence agencies that said all that stuff about Trump, you know, Russian collusion, the Hunter laptop, all that stuff. That's all garbage. That's the deep state. They're still alive and well. And this is the thing that we've got to fight. You know, under the Biden administration, the FBI went to Twitter, says, we don't like these stories. We think they're false. We want you to take them down. Had they not done that, Biden would never have won, because the laptop would have been out there. And I mean, you look at where we are now. He comes out and gives preemptive pardons. First time in our history. I don't even know what those mean. But look at the road we're going down. And when you start suppressing information, you start losing your freedom. And if people are willing to allow a little bit of their freedoms to go away, you'll never regain it. And this is something we have to fight back against. And I appreciate what you and Mark do, because like on John's show and ours, our goal is to educate, motivate, and activate people so that they know these things are going on.
Yeah, that's so in sync with what we do, Ted, and I appreciate it because it's good positive reinforcement on our end. John, your thoughts on Elon buying X and getting the truth out there?
Well, I think if you saw in the last election about younger people voting for Donald Trump, and if you break those numbers down even further, the younger people, the like 18 to 21-year-olds, voted for Trump in a much bigger than, say, 25 and up. And I think part of that is because of things like Elon buying Twitter and turning it into X, because, you know, the young people get most of their information now online, like from a show like this, I'm hoping. But, you know, there was a lot of censorship that was happening during that time. And so they weren't getting but one side of the information. And I think what terrifies the progressives the most is the access to young people that shows like yours and shows like Ted and I are doing. It's called the Ward Scott Files, and we call it our pirate podcast. Everybody's welcome to join it. But I think they're terrified that these young people might watch some old dudes like us, and we might actually make a little sense to them.
Yeah, well said, John. I mean, we've been saying for
Chris, can I come back to something there? During my campaign, once I got elected, we kept getting bumped off of YouTube, Facebook. They said our stuff was too controversial, and it was like a Saturday Night Live skit, things like that. And they were coming after us and blocking us. We were blocked in my congressional office on our feed that we're putting out there. And, you know, being a strong conservative, they were coming out and they did that while I was a member of Congress, and they're still doing that to members of Congress. This stuff has got to end. And again, I wish you the most success in your podcast to educate people so that we're not relying on the legacy media, which to me is a joke today.
Yeah, I used to say, Ted, that legacy media, best case scenario was infotainment, worst case scenario, propaganda-tainment. You go back to 1980, there was over 500 independently owned news organizations in the country. Now, half a dozen large conglomerates own 99%. And at the end of the day, I think you're both right as far as it's scaring them that they're going after the youngins, because there's only two things that the Democrats are trying to accomplish. If you cut it right down to its lowest common denominator, they don't breed, they don't have kids. So if they don't flood the country with illegals that'll vote for them forever, and they don't indoctrinate our children, nobody will vote for them. So the fact that the indoctrination, maybe it's stuck on a generation or two, but it's not sticking on Gen Z from the looks of it.
Well, you know, what's interesting is Mark Twain back in the 1800s says, for those that read the newspaper, those that don't read the newspaper, they're uninformed. Those that do are misinformed.
Yeah,
that hasn't changed.
Great quote. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, so we're getting now into the actual articles, because John and I discussed this, and Mike and I have discussed this many times in the past, and I know that you discussed it as well, Ted. So years ago, there was an incident that happened, Ted, and I'm not going to tell the whole story because I'm cognizant of our time, but there was a law that they were trying to pass here in Florida. Christie was in office, and I went and researched it, and I found out that this law had already been put in place in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And this was in 2003. So when I went digging a little bit deeper, that's when I first came across Klaus Schwab, the WEF, and the Young Global Leaders Program. And ever since then, I've kept a pretty close eye on what's going on in other countries, because it's a harbinger of things to come here in America. In this case, you know, all the stuff that they're doing in Europe right now against European politicians, like canceling the results of elections because of Russian interference on TikTok. I mean, it holds no water, makes no sense whatsoever. But I'll set the tone for this here. So essentially, there's been this alarming trend in Europe where governments, courts are targeting patriotic parties and leaders. In Germany, I can't pronounce the D, so I'm just going to tell you it's the AfD party. The Germans are trying to ban them completely. They got some high-level court that basically said they're extremists. So the next step for the German government would be to ban them. And they're polling really, really strongly, but the government labels them as extremists for wanting to protect German culture and borders. And the crazy thing is, there was an 87-year-old woman who went to jail recently in Germany because she posted an anti-migrant post on social media. And, you know, when you read the article, It's absolutely hilarious. Listen to the language in this here. So let me give you the title. Germany, 87-year-old woman jailed for anti-migrant social media posts. And you come down here and let me see where it is. They apprehended an 87-year-old woman. Like, and this is going on in both England and Germany. And that's why I said I felt like Joe Rogan's comments as far as censorship are concerned were really important. So Mike Sterling, I want to give all three of you a chance to speak on this, but I'll go to you first, Mike, as far as the extremely heavy hand. Mike, remember we had an episode where we discussed the UK Metro Police chief saying that he was going to extradite Americans, or he's going to come and get us if we said anything bad about migrants?
Right. So this is Germany. This is par for the course with them, and has been for a very, very long time. Well, basically since the death of the Kaiser. You know, I mean, their entire political process is a mess. If you've spent any time there, and really all you have to do is spend about a month there, and you can look around and go, oh, this is a dictatorship. And this goes back even back into the 80s and 90s when I was over there. You look around and go, oh yeah, this is a dictatorship with the lens of a little bit of democracy folded over the top of it. So essentially, it's still National Socialism.
Yeah, exactly.
Just with less goose stepping.
So we've got some other stories as well that are related to this. So I'm going to pull it up so that we can try to get back on the clock here. Keyboard warrior British crackdown results in 3-year sentence over anti-migrant postings. So essentially, this kid, he's 18 years old, posted some stuff on social media that he was against the invasion of his country, and therefore he was labeled as far right. So in Europe in particular, every single article or broadcast on these subjects always says far right. They're beating the heck out of that word. John, give me your thoughts on what it would look like if one of the states here in America tried to do this, because I've heard rumblings that there are some blue states that are looking at what's been going on in England and Germany in particular and passing laws here to basically put you in jail, just like over there, for causing somebody anxiety.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me coming from some states. But, you know, when you were talking about that, Chris, I got to thinking about this, that, you know, you talk to a lot of young people and even older people, they tend to think that Europe, because it's quote democracies, that they have the same guaranteed rights that we have through our U.S. Constitution. And nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, they are democracies. Yes, they have freedom compared to many other places. But when you go down like the Bill of Rights, they don't have those. They don't have free speech. Obviously, you're getting locked up. They don't have property rights the same way, private property rights that we have. And don't even get us started on like the Second Amendment and that type of thing. So I think mistakenly, many Americans believe that the Europeans, Western Europeans, Germany is a great example, and England too, have the same basic philosophy about their rights that we do. And that's just simply not the case.
Yeah, very true. So Ted, I left you to the end for a very specific reason. And Archangel made a comment. It's interesting how everything always happens at the right time. So Pakistan is 96-97% Muslim. They have old fission style nuclear warheads, so like 10 kiloton range, reportedly as much as 40 kiloton, which would be pretty close to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They don't have any ICBMs, and Mike can speak to this from the perspective of these are large fission warheads. They say that they have missiles that can potentially go up to 1,600 miles, so that's not even half what's required for an ICBM. The reason I left it to the end, Ted, is because I really want to hear your thoughts on this. If and when the Muslims take control of government, they get voted into virtually all offices in England and France, all of a sudden have our thermonuclear weaponry at their disposal. So the British bought our Trident missiles. They have eight nuclear submarines that can strike anywhere in the world with significantly larger thermonuclear warheads. And then the French, they have the Triad. They can deliver it by land, air, and sea. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, John, just because it's related to this. These people who are trying to entrench themselves forever in government include people that have come from Pakistan. The 37 largest cities now in Britain have a Muslim mayor. And we're going to have, my point is, I think we're going to have to liberate England and France, or we're going to face some pretty crazy stuff.
Did you want that for John or me?
Go ahead, Ted.
So for you, Ted, and then Mike, I want to hear your thoughts on the
No,
nuclear.
you're absolutely right. And this is something that's happening. Samuel Huntington wrote a book called The Clash of Civilizations back in the 90s. I've been through that book. This is exactly what he laid out they would do. The Muslims come in small numbers, they're model citizens, and then, you know, they get on the school board, they get into this, and they're model citizens, and then they run for county commissioner, and then on up. And then that's what you see now. Now they're the mayors in those countries. This is something that is happening right in front of us. This is something, as you pointed out, if you dare bring this up, you're a racist, you know, you're anti-Muslim. And no, we want to protect our culture. And just real briefly, if you look at the Western European liberal democracies, we are responsible, especially the United States with our Declaration of Independence Constitution, for creating a system that people want to come into. Sociologists have said that there's been roughly 100 billion people that have ever lived on the planet. 100 billion. Out of that, only 4.5% have ever lived in the liberties and freedoms that we live in. The amazing thing is 80% of us are alive today. That's what's online here. This is from a Judeo-Christian ideologies that came from the Greeks, the Romans, the Magna Carta, the Mayflower Compact, up to our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. This is what's at stake. People need to wake up, and they need to reject this kind of ideology. And, you know, we'll honor every religion in the planet, but you need to respect our laws and norms in this country, period.
Yeah, we frequently, Ted, mentioned that there's not one instance in recorded history where two or more diametrically opposed cultures have lived peacefully in the same geographic area. So it's literally, like you said, it's a fight for our culture. And John, I got to tell you, I don't know why you said all that stuff about Ted before, but he seems like he's a pretty smart guy to me. I mean,
well, I
didn't want high expectations for me.
We work pretty good together. Ted is he's the intellectual, and I'm just the old cracker country boy. What can I tell you? But one thing I've noticed, Chris, is that lately I've been going out and doing kind of a man on the street type things. And Ted and I both went to one of these Tesla protests a month ago, and I went to a communist thing this past Thursday in Gainesville. And I described that. And, you know, I'm used to hearing stuff that's anti-Republican, anti-Donald Trump, of course, in the last several years. But one thing that's beginning to trouble me is I'm hearing a lot of people anti-Christian. And I've not really heard that verbalized, kind of like intellectually, you know, that what they're worried about beyond Donald Trump is the Christian indoctrination of our nation. And I just don't really get that because, as I told you, I think off the air one time, Chris, that, you know, growing up in a little town that I did, I was never asked, was I a Christian? I might have been asked whether I was saved, but I just assumed we all were, and I never really thought about it. But we are in danger of becoming a non-Christian nation. And that doesn't mean you don't have room for other belief systems, but if we lose the fundamental Christianity, then the Bill of Rights and inalienable rights, what does inalienable rights mean if you don't have faith in God? What do they mean? They come from men or women, people, and then we know what can happen.
Yeah, exactly. So, Mike, you got a whole bunch of stuff here. One, want to hear your thoughts on Muslims getting elected in France and Britain and essentially controlling their countries and therefore their military. And then I want to hear your thoughts on Marine Le Pen, and then I'll just go right back up the side to Ted and John after you.
I mean, this is the same process that we've discussed previously. That is the playbook directly out of Hadith, where yes, you send in your front people, get a foothold. Now you start sending in the masses. they get into there. Congratulations. There's no such thing as a moderate Muslim. You know, then the knuckleheads come in. And once the knuckleheads come in, that's it. It's over. And the only difference between a moderate Muslim and a radical fundamentalist is that while the radical fundamentalist is trying to cut your head off, the moderate will hold your feet. So, and that's all there is to it. And it's been that way forever. That was how they got into Spain. That was how they got, I mean, and I'm not talking Spain now. I'm talking Spain 1,000 years ago, right? When they got into all these areas, that's how they did it, right? If you know that you can't just automatically go in and conquer the place, you take it from within. And this is the playbook. This is the exact same thing that they've been doing for well over, what, 1,500? Well, yeah, close to 1,500 years now, right? Ever since the 680s. This is how you get caliphates. Right. And everybody keeps not looking at the history of it because they're telling you what they're going to do. And if somebody's going to tell you what they're going to do, maybe you should listen to them.
Well, I think that's what John and Ted were alluding to. God forbid that you say something, you know, untoward these people because automatically you're a racist.
Yeah, well, watch me.
So we'll start with you, Mike, work our way back up. So Marine Le Pen, right-wing conservative, looking like very strong chance that she could win the election next year in France. They levy a bunch of accusations against her and then find her guilty in court in a circus, just like Donald Trump and, you know, Engeron and the rest of these judges. And they're saying that she won't do any jail time, but she can't run for political office for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And that's really the crux of this. John and I had a really interesting discussion on this yesterday. They want to take out any competition any way they possibly can. I mean, what are your thoughts on Europe's out of control?
So Europe's always been out of control, and freedom, post-World War II, freedom has been a very thin veneer in Europe. It always has been. You've got an extremely stratified society all the way across Western Europe. I mean, if the Russians did anything right, they kind of got rid of that stratification in the eastern half of the country. That was the only thing that they did right when they dominated the entirety of the East Bloc. But in the Western states, you've still got the aristocracy running everything, and they couldn't give a crap about the peasants. And I say peasants because that is exactly what they see everybody else has. This is not a situation that you cannot compare what happens there to what we know in the United States. It is an extremely stratified society. None of the rules, none of that is ever going to apply to the aristocracy over there. And she stands to get in their way. She was one of those people. She'll go in there and she'll point at the aristocracy, and the aristocrats are not going to have it.
Yeah, well said. So let me just add a couple more quick things, Ted, before you weigh in. So you've got parties being banned. You've got individual leaders like Marine Le Pen, essentially in the crosshairs. So they convicted her of misusing European Union funds and therefore banned her for 5 years. And it's totally political. It's a setup to stop her again from running next year. But you've got another French guy, Eric Zemmour, has been hit with the fines for speaking out against unchecked immigration. And the EU courts now have upheld his conviction. Basically, they'd rather protect their agenda of flooding Europe than to support free speech. I mean, when Keir Starmer said to Trump in the Oval Office, well, you know, we've been strong proponents of freedom of speech for, you know, generations. I mean, it was such a bald-faced lie. Then you've got in Romania, you've got the Calin Georgescu. He wins the presidential election. The European Union says, no, we don't like the results. We're going to throw it out. That's the one that was supposedly Russian disinformation over TikTok, which is ridiculous. And now he can't run at all. But now we've got another conservative coming to the fore. So, Ted, do we have any options at our disposal as Americans to turn the tide on this without violating any election laws? Because some of these countries have very, very strict election laws. And then if one of us were to step foot in their country, there'd be a pre-existing warrant and they'd, basically lock us up.
No, I mean, yeah, we've got ways we can hold people accountable in those other countries, but we need to look internally first. You can't, it's biblical. You can't feed your neighbor if you're starving. We've got to fix our own problems in this country. You look at Geert Wilders in Holland back in the mid 2000s. He spoke out heavily against the Muslim invasion. He went to jail. He got banned. Now he's back in parliament because the tide has changed. Bolsonaro in Brazil, he was against the establishment. They went after him. They're looking to put him in jail. They wouldn't let him travel to the United States. You look at Donald Trump in this country. How many states tried to prevent him from running in the election? Look at the mayor or one of the senators in New York wanting to ban Teslas from being sold in the state of New York because it doesn't fit their narrative. We can win this, but people have to understand, number one, this is going on. This is affecting our liberties and freedoms, and you have to be engaged. We can't be complacent at this time, because what happened with complacency in pre-World II Germany is the populace was complacent, and then they got Nazism in there. We have to wake up, and you look at the modern Democrat socialists like AOC. She's the Democrat Socialist of America Party. They're a communist organization. They're tied in heavily with the communists in Norway. And the person that is their leader of that now, his last name I think is Karen. He said that all communists are socialists until they progress to socialism, then they become communists. This is what's at stake in America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said, Ted. So before you chime in here, John, I want to point out, in case nobody else has noticed, every single news article in tonight's episode is from a hardcore far left-wing standpoint like Politico, because they're showing their colors. It's not hard to see. I did it on purpose because I wanted people just to see how ridiculous this is. Mike, do you want to say something before John goes?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how Politico is actually still doing stuff now that they've been defunded and are no longer receiving money from the United States government.
That we know of.
Well, at least the main river of money is cut off.
Right.
Might be those oligarchies.
Might be.
Oligarchs going to do what oligarchs do.
You mean like Bernie Sanders and 4 houses worth X amount of millions and that sort of thing?
Yeah, the Soros, that whole crowd.
Yeah. John, give me your thoughts on the individual perspective for now. We'll get into the country stuff deeper, but persecution of individuals, political individuals.
Well, it's happening here as well, and it will happen. One of the things that troubles me is I keep hearing from conservative sources like Fox News and stuff like that the Democrats and the progressives are on the run, so to speak, and that they're not coming back, and that party is done and all of that. And I can tell you, and Ted could echo this as well, being up there in the belly of the beast like he was, they will never, ever give up. They will never give up. They don't care about individual rights. And I don't know if you remember this blast from the past. We played some clips on our show today. This Nana Janowitz, she was the head of the Disinformation Governance Board under the Biden administration, very briefly. Well, she was, a character here, but just this past week, she was over testifying before the EU Parliament, and her first words out of her mouth, and I would encourage your listeners to check out the video, was warning the EU about the threat to freedom of speech and all of that the United States is now becoming. She literally was saying that. So, yes, I'm very concerned about what's happening in Europe and the individual freedoms, but don't think for a minute that it can't happen here, and it isn't already happening. We talked about it again on our show today that going back to the Obama administration, you had this, what was her name? Lois Lerner, basically the head of the IRS. And she testified in Congress, basically admitted, even though she took the fifth, that they weaponized the IRS against Tea Party groups and whatnot. And if you think for 1 second, you know, I get passionate about this, that they were hiring those 75,000 IRS agents to go after, as Bernie says, the millionaires and the billionaires, then you got another thing coming. They were coming after average Americans. And so it troubles me. It might be off topic a little bit, but it troubles me, Chris, when I hear that, we've whipped the progressive Democrats. They're done, because they will never be done.
I couldn't agree more. So, Mike, I'm going to come to you after Ted, only because Ted mentioned this. So, former Brazilian President Bolsonaro won in a landslide the first time. I believe he won the second time, but the election was stolen just like ours in 2020. And they've gone after him for one thing after another. And as y'all mentioned, they won't even let him leave the country. He was scheduled to come to Donald Trump's inauguration. They cut that off. He can't be a candidate until 2030. It's the same SOP, whether it's Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or South and Central America. So I'd love to hear you just expand a little bit on Bolsonaro, because he was a good president for Brazil.
He really was. And with all this stuff going on around the world, you've got to think it's all coordinated. You know, the one world government, you know, whatever you want to call it, the Klaus Schwab's, who he's been defrocked and they're throwing him out of the WEF. But Bolsonaro was a very bold, very different type of leader in Brazil. It's somebody they needed. It's kind of like Javier Milei in Argentina. He's a no BS guy. He's changed that country around. And the establishment, the one worlders, they do not like this. Keep in mind what Klaus Schwab said. By 2030, you'll own nothing and you will be happy. That tells you where they're going. And you get these autocratic, democratic, or socialist, or worse, governments. They don't want freedom. They don't want liberty, because they can't control you. And that's why we have to fight. And we can never back down.
100%. So I think Mike is going to give us a bit of a tongue lashing here.
You will own nothing. You will like it. You will live in the pods. You will eat the bugs. And you will like it. Hail to the party.
We'll all have a good time.
Yeah, exactly. Mike, do you want to weigh in on Bolsonaro at all? Or Klaus, would you like to weigh in on
these guys pretty well covered. However, I am a big fan of Javier Milei.
Same here. So Viktor Orban, of course, from Hungary, has been a major thorn in the side of the European Union. But he tried to essentially scuttle this deal of additional aid and money going to the Ukraine. And the EU basically said, well, you saw what we just did in Romania. Don't think we won't do it to you unless you get in line. And for the first time that I'm aware of since he was elected, he actually kowtowed to what they ordered him to do, because this guy, he's very proud Romanian. He's very populist in nature, but even he sees the writing on the wall that if you don't play by their rules, they kick you out of the game completely. John, I'll go to you since it looks like Ted's got an issue there.
Guys, I've got to catch a plane, so I turn my camera off so I can walk.
Okay.
Ted's quite the traveler. He's still testifying before Congress and that type of thing. And, that's why we make such a good team, I believe. But, yeah, I mean, what happens over in Europe is definitely happening here. It is a prelude, if you will, to what's going to happen here. And more of our people seem to be losing, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, the concept that makes America so special. I mean, we are, and I used to say this on a show I used to have with the McKnights. You mentioned them, that I used to say I'm battling ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her, because that's where we're at right now. Can you even imagine, Chris and Mike? I mean, can you imagine a world without the United States of America? Because that could happen if things keep going like they are. And, you talked about these different leaders in these different parts of the world. How could they possibly hang on without the United States of America?
Yep, absolutely. True story.
Oh yeah.
So the next one I've got up here, this is pretty crazy left-wing stuff. Spain's voters have kept the far right out of power, but for how long? So essentially, this liberal publication in Europe is saying that, the Spanish haven't voted. They don't want anything like Donald Trump. They don't want anything that's nationalist or populist or anything like that. And the funny thing about this is I would bet everything I've got that these elections have been fixed as well, because here's just a general question, Mike, because you spent some time in California years ago. Dianne Feinstein was in one office or another for over 50 years, and she held precisely 0 campaign events. I don't think anybody voted for her. I think she was installed, just like Kamala was installed, just like Newsom was installed.
She's always been installed. I mean, she was a pick. They picked her. They put her. I mean, I remember that from when I lived out there. I mean, it just, yeah, everybody knew it. It was a very open secret in California that everybody was like, oh yeah, she's the party darling, and they're gonna have her there no matter what anybody says. And that's the way coastal California politics goes, period. Is I mean, you only have a illusion that of democracy out there, and that's it. So I don't care what anybody says out there. I have lived out there long enough, seen enough of that. Dirtbags, all corruption all the time, and it's corruption from the point of Stalinist corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all self-serving. It's all it does nothing but become a self-licking lollipop from square one all the way through.
Yeah. So Ted, before you jump on a plane there, I'll go to you and then John. But I love to hear your thoughts on the comment that I made as far as these politicians being installed and not being legitimately elected. I kind of think this is a funny headline that Spain's voters have kept the far right out of power. They love the word far right. They usually put a hyphen between it. But do you believe that to be the case, or do you think that there's election manipulation going on there as well?
No, I think that is the case. I think that's exactly what they want. And it goes back to who's going to control the world. You can't have a country like ours of 330 million people believing in liberty and freedom. And the only way you can do that is to keep the puppets in place so that they can control the populace. I mean, this is so basic. And, you got to look at what's going on in our country. We live under an illusion of liberty and freedoms, and we do have them. But do you really have Second Amendment rights? If you pull a gun out in public in Florida, you've exposed your gun or your land rights. Can you build a tree house for your kids without multiple permits and all that kind of garbage? So it's slipping away from us, and we have to be vigilant and fight back against this.
Yeah, well said, Ted. I appreciate that. John, you're batting cleanup on this one.
Yeah, well, to me, what we've got to do is we've got to do what I call man the political ramparts here in the United States of America. Because if we don't man the political ones, and that means, as Ted said earlier, educate ourselves and others, motivate ourselves and others, and get activated no matter what age you are. Because in Germany, obviously, they're scared of an 87-year-old woman. So, you can be a threat to this system, I guess, at any age. But we've got to man those political ramparts, Chris and Mike, too, because if we don't, we're going to have to man the real ones again. And to quote the Democrats, I won't say a curse word, but that'd be a dadgum shame, because that price has already been paid. And what I would tell people is we need to become warriors. I call them happy warriors, because we don't need to be nasty like the left. Let them expose themselves. But we need to activate and that's what I'm hoping to do with, and Ted and I both agree with our show. And I love the way your show is going, because people don't realize this flicker, this experiment we call freedom could be blown out. And what would a world be like, I'll say it again, without the United States of America?
Yeah,
I just don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, unimaginable for sure.
I do have a quick point for John. They're afraid of an 89-year-old woman. Come on now, you've been all over the South. There's a lot of 89-year-old women to be afraid of. So,
oh yeah. Well, my mom made it to
standpoint,
98, and she used to tell me that famous thing: "This is hurting me more than it's hurting you."
right?
So, Mike, you're preaching to the choir here. John, Ted, and I all live in Florida, which is known as God's waiting room. So we're aware of that. So we've only got a couple minutes to wrap up here. So I'm just going to pivot briefly to a couple things to wrap up. I just put a link in all the chats. If you use that link, you get a 30-day membership for free on our Substack as a guardian. So you'll get all of the daily sit reps. You'll get all the aftermath stuff, which will be starting in approximately 7 minutes. And the links are on Substack and Patreon for Aftermath and SHTF prepping for fur babies tonight. You also get an invite to our Signal chat, which has an insane amount of intelligence and information sharing on it there as well. Plus, you get all 49 of our e-magazines. 37 of them sell for $9.99 a piece. So it's about $370 worth of survival magazines. If you had nothing else, you had no internet, you had no books, those magazines alone would get you through. I want to give a quick shout out to Dale, member of our community. He made this post yesterday, and I thought it was one of the best ones that I saw in the Signal chat. So well done, Dale. And I love that our Florida Attorney General is standing up and going to defy a federal judge on their, crazy rulings, and that the court has essentially overstepped their boundaries. Wednesday, we've got Teresa Carpenter coming back, so PAO from the Navy. But I'm traveling Wednesday, so that may be a kind of interesting episode. But that's basically it. John, Ted, I'd love to have you all back on at some point in the future. And I also want to thank you, Mike, of course, because you're working insane hours right now. And I want to thank all of our subscribers. They allow us to do what we do. So, gentlemen, I appreciate your time, appreciate your insight. Look forward to seeing you all the next time. We've got a short video to wind this up with here. Hang out and watch it, and I will see you in the Aftermath webinar in 6 minutes.
God bless America.
Yep.
Peace out.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and God bless America.
Take a look what happened. We're